Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. Data centers are booming, but there are big energy and environmental risks. Volunteers hand out yard signs in June against data center complex in West Virginia. Google recently courted the township of Franklin, Indiana, so that it could construct a giant campus to house the computer hardware that powers its internet business. But the company needed to rezone more than 450 acres in the Indianapolis suburb, and residents weren't having it. Many were concerned the facility would consume huge amounts of water and electricity while delivering few local benefits. When a lawyer representing Google confirmed at a September public meeting that the company was pulling its data center proposal, cheers erupted from sign-waving residents. Similar fights are happening around the United States. On one side are companies pouring billions of dollars into data centers, which increasingly are being built to support artificial intelligence models that promise to transform how people live and work. On the other side are residents who worry the construction spree will have dire consequences for the environment, power prices, and surrounding communities. How tech companies and government officials handle those concerns will shape the industry's future. In the US and the country's competitiveness, according to analysts and academics who track the AI industry, local opposition, slowing down the development of the industry, or distributing it in sort of weird regional patterns is probably the most overlooked potential outcome in this conversation, says Joseph Majkut, Director of the Energy Security and Climate Change Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Here's what you need to know about the data center and AI boom and what's at stake. What are data centers? Data centers are big buildings that house computer hardware to store and process digital information. They essentially function as the backbone of the internet. Some of the largest cover more than 1 million square feet, the size of more than 17 football fields. When you read the story or send an email or transfer money from your bank account online, you're relying on data centers scattered around the world. And that computing power has a big environmental footprint. A typical AI data center uses as much electricity as 100,000 households, and the largest under development will consume 20 times more. According to the International Energy Agency, they also suck up billions of gallons of water for systems to keep all that computer hardware cool. Why am I hearing so much about data centers right now? Data centers have been around for decades, but there's an investment frenzy around AI right now that's fueling a construction boom. That growth is being driven by AI investors seeking enormous profits. Thanks to the rising interest in AI from individual consumers and businesses. Within 2 years of ChatGPT's launch in 2022, for example, around 40% of households in the US and United Kingdom reported using AI chatbots, according to the IEA. Roughly the same share of large companies were using AI last year, up from 15% in 2020. Agency said. Tech companies are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on data centers and AI computer chips. They're betting that more people and businesses will use the technology in the future. By 2027, AI is expected to account for 28% of the global data center market. According to Goldman Sachs, more than double its current share. An Amazon Web Service data center is shown situated near single-family homes in Stone Ridge, Virginia. Where are data centers being built? With money flooding in, developers are flocking to areas where a lot of data centers are already, like Northern Virginia's data center alley and parts of Texas, according to the IEA. But the agency said there are also signs that development is spreading into other markets, like Las Vegas, that offer affordable land, cheap electricity from renewable power plants, and industry tax incentives. The Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis said this month that a potential data center boom is just getting started in its district, which covers Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and parts of Michigan and Wisconsin. It definitely feels like we're starting to see the rollout of what these massive investments in data centers are potentially going to start to look like on the ground, says Melissa Scanlon, director of the Center for Water Policy at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. What are the benefits of AI? Artificial intelligence generally refers to computer systems that learn to carry out tasks that traditionally require human intelligence, like reasoning and decision making, according to NASA. Some AI is being used to make images and videos online. The IEA says it's also being deployed in the medical field to rapidly map protein structures for drug development, in the energy industry to quickly detect pipeline leaks and manage electricity networks, and in weather forecasting to produce more accurate outlooks. To remain competitive, the US needs to be able to respond to what the market demands, whether it's more AI in form of robotics or we want much more in the form of digital services to make professionals more productive, says Marge Koop for the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Then there's a variety of applications in the national security, cybersecurity realm, where the US having a strong lead in the best AI models, the best chips, I think is also something we want to pursue. Does it matter if the data centers that train and run those AI models are located in the US? There are certainly potential economic benefits, like construction jobs and local tax revenue, but some localities are giving up a portion of those payments by offering tax breaks to lure project developers. Because much of the upfront investment is about physical infrastructure, having that investment here is hugely beneficial to the American economy, says Andrew Cheen, a professor of computer science at the University of Chicago and a senior scientist at Argonne National Laboratory. The challenge for communities is figuring out how to turn those initial investments into long-term benefits. Cheen adds, like high-paying jobs. Since it doesn't take many people to operate a data center once they're built, the facilities don't usually support many permanent jobs. What's driving the local pushback against data centers? Some people don't want huge industrial facilities and all the noise and light that comes with them, changing the character of their community. But also, people are concerned about data centers depleting local water supplies for their cooling systems, driving up electricity bills, and worsening climate change if the facilities rely on fossil fuel power plants for the electricity they need. The IEA says climate pollution from the power plants that run data centers could more than double by 2035. Consider what's happening around the Great Lakes, where Scanlan of the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee says there's a flurry of data centers activity. The Great Lakes can be thought of as a giant pitcher of water with straws going into it from water utilities, business, and power plants in 8 states and 2 Canadian provinces, Scanlan says. The question is, how much more water can the lakes provide for data centers and the power plants needed to run them in the coming years? In Georgia, some residents reported problems getting drinking water from their wells after a data center was built nearby. And in Arizona, some cities have restricted water deliveries to facilities that use a lot of water, including data centers. Dan Diorio, Vice President of State Policy at the Data Center Coalition, an industry group, says companies have been working to reduce how much water their facilities consume. While some data centers use evaporative cooling systems in which water is lost as steam, others rely on closed-loop systems that use less water. A Google data center in Georgia uses treated wastewater for cooling and then returns it to the Chattahoochee River, Durio says, and there's a push for waterless cooling systems. It's a balance between water and electricity, Diorio says. If you use more electricity to cool, you're going to use less water. If you use more water, you'll use less electricity. Rising electricity bills are a major concern as data centers spike power demand in certain areas. An analysis by the Union of Concerned Scientists recently found that in 2024, homes and businesses in Illinois, Maryland, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia faced $4.3 billion in additional costs from transmission projects that were needed to deliver power to data centers. Durio says the data center industry is fully committed to paying its full cost of service for electricity. Data centers aren't the only source of new power demand. The construction of factories and increased sale of electric vehicles and home appliances like electric stoves are also increasing the country's electricity needs. Compounding the concern of data centers, environmental and economic impacts is frustration that tech companies aren't forthcoming about their operations. Without more transparency around water and energy consumption, Scanlon says the public doesn't have the information it needs to make informed decisions about data center development. Durio says the data center companies are trying to be responsible partners in the communities where they operate, but they sometimes worry that sharing information about their water and energy use could give rivals a competitive edge. Are there other challenges to data center development? A big challenge is having enough energy to meet rising demand. The Trump administration has been giving steps to limit development of renewable energy projects. Industry executives and analysts say renewables are crucial to boost power supplies because the projects can be built quickly, and they generate electricity that is relatively cheap. Pavon Van, an infrastructure fellow at the Institute for Progress, says there's a clear conflict between the administration's position on renewables and its desire to accelerate data center construction. The Trump administration is focused on unleashing the forms of energy from natural gas to nuclear that do work and that do not need consistent government subsidies to power the next golden age for America. Solar and wind power coupled with large batteries to store electricity are reliable power sources. There's also widespread agreement among energy analysts and executives that natural gas and nuclear will play an important role in meeting new electricity demand. And they say those technologies can't be deployed quickly enough at scale right now to meet the country's immediate needs. With new cuts at CDC, some fear there's nobody to answer the phone. Around 600 workers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention were cut over the long weekend, and as part of a wider push by the Trump administration to slash the size of the federal workforce during the government shutdown. It was not a smooth process. On Friday, more than 1,300 CDC employees were notified that they had lost their jobs. Many of them were furloughed because of the shutdown, and found out only after Russell Vought, director of the Office of Management and Budget, posted on X that the RIFs have begun. The next day, around 700 employees got emails revoking these reduction in force notices, according to numbers compiled by the National Public Health Coalition, a group of former CDC employees. Aaron Melton Backus, a health communication specialist with the CDC's Office on Smoking and Health, who has been on administrative leave for months, was one of them. It was the third time this year she's received a termination notice. We have no idea why certain programs were eliminated and others were saved, Backus said in a joint press conference held Tuesday by NPHC. At this point, it seems like the chaos and lack of transparency is the point. In a Tuesday court filing, the Department of Health and Human Services attributed some of the firings and rapid rescindment to data discrepancies and processing errors. When the dust settled, around 600 CDC staffers were cut over the weekend, according to the former CDC employee group and AFGE Local 2883, a union that represents CDC workers. Those fired include CDC staff who brief Congress, those working on health statistics and chronic disease. It also affected CDC support staff, such as those at the CDC library who provided mental health support after an attack at the CDC's main campus in August, and human resources staff who were called back from furlough to lay off colleagues and members of their own team. HHS declined to confirm numbers or groups affected by this round of layoffs, but Andrew Nixon, Director of Communications, said staffers that were terminated were designated non-essential. The court filings state that on October 10th, a total of 982 employees were purposefully cut from HHS, which includes agencies such as the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, in addition to CDC. The National Federal Workers Union is contesting the legality of these and other layoffs. These illegal firings for our union members during a federal government shutdown is a callous attack on hardworking Americans and putting the livelihoods, health, and safety of our members and communities at great risk, said Yolanda Jacobs, a health communication specialist at CDC and president of AFGE Local 2883. Speaking at a union press conference on Tuesday. The recent round of cuts add to the stream of workers leaving the CDC this year due to earlier rounds of firings. Early retirements, resignations, the CDC has lost around 3,000 employees, or a quarter of its staff, since January, according to the union. The entire staff of the CDC's Washington office was eliminated in the recent cuts, upending a long-standing support system for congressional representatives. CDC has worked directly with Congress for decades to help constituents by providing data, expertise, and insight when needed, said Dr. John Brooks, who retired last year as Chief Medical Officer for the CDC's Division of HIV Prevention at the NPHC press conference. These firings mean Congress no longer has a means of direct access to the agency. It funds when it needs information or briefings. Outside of the Washington office, CDC policy experts that help develop briefings and answer questions from Congress have also been eliminated, according to NPHC. Overall, the cuts to CDC staff and budget under the Trump administration undermine the nation's public health infrastructure. Brooks says, many experts, including myself, are concerned that we are no longer well prepared for the next big outbreak or disaster because of the Trump administration's continued erosion of our nation's ability to respond to public health emergencies. State and local health departments are feeling the effects. When faced with problems such as outbreaks or food poisonings or hospital infections, they've traditionally reached out to the CDC for help. Sometimes that help might be, we're going to send some people to help you investigate this. Sometimes that might be talking to somebody who's the world's expert on a specific type of infection or exposure, said Dr. Karen Remley, a former CDC official and former health commissioner for Virginia. At the NPHC press conference, now there's nobody to answer the phone. In an email, Nixon of HHS described the federal health infrastructure as a bloated bureaucracy and said HHS continues to close wasteful and duplicative entities to streamline the agency for the American people. It feels terrible. Federal workers' family tightens their belts as shutdown drags on. Stephanie Rogers, at her mother's home outside Denver, where she and her 2 young daughters now live. Rogers has dipped into her retirement to help the family get through the federal shutdown. In a way, Stephanie Rogers started preparing for the current moment months ago when she and her 2 daughters moved in with her mother about half an hour south of Denver. High prices for everything was certainly one reason. When you add up the numbers between both of our families' households, it was going to be something that we could not keep going long term, says Rogers, who is 44 and divorced with no child support. Rogers has been a microbiologist with the Food and Drug Administration for 16 years and is now among hundreds of thousands of federal employees not working. She is also a chapter president with the National Treasury Employees Union. Another big motivation for living together, the uncertainty of a new administration, plus Rogers' memory of the last federal shutdown back in 2018. And we're living in that reality now, she says. And so that is our decision, to just make sure all of us survive this process. Her mother, Nina Chapman, says she loves having her granddaughters around. I was grateful we had a basement. It was just a wonderful area to put everybody, she says. Planning ahead for life without a paycheck. When the previous shutdown dragged on for 35 days, from late 2018 into 2019, Rogers says she was utterly unprepared. So she made sure to plan better this time. In the weeks before this shutdown, as the deadline for this funding lapse approached, she rushed to squeeze in medical appointments. She requested early refills to the kids' medications in case she couldn't afford them without a paycheck. Rogers also made a painful decision that will carry its own financial cost. I had to pull out of my retirement, which has had some tax consequences for next year, she says. Rogers has asked for flexibility with her car payment and is thinking twice about extracurriculars for her girls, who are 10 and 12. They might have to skip field trips that cost extra or volleyball games that are a long drive away. And the plan has been to buy only essential food. In fact, we just had our freezer go out. She says, we lost our meat. And that was devastating to us because we were counting on that. Rogers has also applied for state unemployment. Furloughed federal workers are generally eligible for that, though they must refund the money when the shutdown ends, and after that they get retroactive pay withheld during the time. We don't know what our future looks like, but President Trump has floated the idea that some workers might be denied back pay, despite a law he signed mandating it in 2019. He's also threatened mass firings during the shutdown. A process the administration said had begun Friday, and Trump has talked about permanently cutting Democrat programs without saying specifically what that means. Rogers says all of this makes the current shutdown feel very different. It feels terrible, she says. I still don't know if I even have a job when I walk away from this, much less if I will get paid. Do I have health insurance if we don't get the payback? It's a really hard place to be in when you have children who will rely on you. Rogers believes she and other federal employees do essential work, such as food inspections, that the general public may only appreciate when they're gone. But across the federal government, it's been stressful all year. Mass layoffs and funding cuts have left fewer people working longer hours. She says, only to be sent the message now that they're not really wanted. My mother worries about it constantly. My daughter has woken up and said, "Does mommy have a job today?" We don't know what our future looks like, she says. So even though she's in her dream job, Rogers says, she has started applying for other positions outside the federal government.